a young age, quite an energetic character, but had this sort of curiosity for shiny things, and struggled somewhat to keep my attention to one thing at a time. Well, I think interestingly, fear sort of keeps you in the lane, doesn't it? And because I struggled with the format of school, perhaps, and conventional education, I had to build strategies around how I was going to get through it all.
You might beg the question, why did you ever dare leave innocence? You know, obviously all of us know the innocent Brown really well.
Yeah, much to the disappointment of my parents and a lot of friends who guffawed me.
Hello and welcome to Inspired Sounds, Rathbone's exclusive podcast dedicated to supporting and empowering entrepreneurs. In each episode, we dive into the journey of inspirational entrepreneurs and founders who we invite to share the thrills and spills of their own journey. We hope you enjoy listening.
Hello, my name is Jake Wellesley-Smith. I'm on the client development team at Rathbones. I have with me today an old friend, Barney Mauleverer, who's come in today. Thank you, Barney, for coming along. Barney's going to share his story. He's a co-founder of Fuel 10K. Fuel 10K make granola bars, they make porridges, cookies, flapjacks, and recently sold to Premier Foods last October. So we're going to ask a few questions about his journey, how it all started and where it all ended. Barney.
Hi, Jake.
When I first knew you, you were what could be termed a bit of a scallywag. Probably at best a sort of a rather distant relationship with authority. Would that be fair to say? How has that sort of trait helped you in your career as an entrepreneur?
Gosh, well, that's an opening question, isn't it? Thanks, Jake. I met Jake when I was 13 years old and we were at school together. I probably did slightly brush with the rule book occasionally. But I would probably summarize it a little bit like, and being able to reflect backwards. I was, from a young age, quite an energetic character, but had this sort of curiosity for shiny things, and struggled somewhat to keep my attention to one thing at a time. So was always looking for sort of life experiences along the way, again, from this early age. And I think that contributed to my inquisitiveness about what I would probably now call perspective, where if you were told to do something because you just did it that way, I would want to know what other people thought about it as well. And that certainly got me into trouble on many occasions, perhaps into my career as well. But I think it wasn't that it was authority that I was pushing against. It was just wanting to experience and get a view from around the room. And I think that's probably something that really helped me form myself into this sort of entrepreneurial shape, where, again, in later life, I recognized I was a real sort of generalist. And because I like shiny things, I was never very good at finishing things, which didn't really help with exams, and which is probably why I'm not a doctor now. But it meant that I could see things I felt that perhaps not everyone else could see. I wanted to know more. I wanted to ask more questions about what I was being asked to do. And I think even at some point I thought, this is a real problem. Maybe it's some sort of disorder or deficiency of some sort. Almost self-diagnosing myself with some disorder or another. But over time, I think I realized that it became a superpower. And I think it's something that would be quite interesting to explore some more.
Yeah. I mean, some of us see that as risk-taking, and we could be averse to risk-taking. You see it as curiosity, that sort of magpie scenario, which is great. So there was no fear behind it. It was just driven purely by curiosity.
Well, I think interestingly, fear sort of keeps you in the lane, doesn't it? And because I struggled with the format of school, perhaps, and conventional education, I had to build strategies around how I was going to get through it all. And that took me into later life as well, a need to build strategies around recognizing that I wasn't going to be the specialist. I'm not a specialist. I needed to surround myself with people who could pick up from my deficiencies, as it were. And so that's what I think I set myself the task to try and achieve over the years that got me to where we are today.
Go on. So how did it all start with Fuel 10K? What was it with Fuel 10K that you saw as the real opportunity? Talk us through that.
I think it kind of sort of pieces back right to the beginning. I started my career in food and drink as employee 007 at Innocent Drinks. I was given a cow van, a van dressed up as a cow, and told to go and sell little smoothies to anyone who might wear a kilt. And so I filled up my little van and drove up to Scotland, over to Ireland, even down in Cornwall somewhere, and cut my teeth on the streets of GB with little fruit juices to go and spread the good news that we've got this new brand, tastes delicious, and it's a little bit quirky. So Innocent sort of gave me my first foray into the food and drink world.
Can I just quickly stop you there?
Mm-hmm.
The question, you might beg the question, why did you ever dare leave Innocent? Obviously all of us know the Innocent brand really well.
Yeah, much to the disappointment of my parents and a lot of friends who afforded me. Most of them were actually working their more traditional routes up into the city and what have you. I'd taken this slightly alternative route into this startup world. But I had this kind of yearning that I wanted to do my own thing at some stage. And for me, it was never about the result or the success or the money. It was about the excitement of being part of something that you're creating. And unfortunately for me, Innocent wasn't actually mine, as it became apparent 5 years after I joined them. But it gave me a very, very good grounding. And in my 20s, that was exactly what I needed back then.
And so just to carry on the Fuel 10K, what was it you saw with this opportunity? How did it all come about?
So I left Innocent Drinks in 2005-06 and ended up setting up a company called Fresh Marketing, which exists today. It's a distribution business where we take UK food brands into international markets. And our role is to try and seed those brands into sort of non-strategic places that the brand wouldn't necessarily get to themselves. We managed a number of brilliant brands, including Eat Natural cereal bars and Bert's chips, Forest Feast, Lizzie's granola. But what we found was that once we had seeded these brands and these brands were getting quite big in the UK, they would then go on and sell, or the strategy would change, or they'd hire an export manager. And we were never going to create our own value. So we set about trying to create our own brands in parallel to this distribution model. And long story short, we made plenty mistakes, but arrived with a breakfast brand, a breakfast product, or even just an opportunity to launch a granola into the UK's biggest supermarket. That came about strangely. We had chosen originally to launch a flavored popcorn brand before this, which was one of our early learnings rather. And when we were pushing this brand through a trade show, a buyer came along and with a Tesco badge, and he said, "Don't worry, I don't buy the popcorn category. I'm actually the breakfast buyer." And I'm looking for a granola product that's going to kind of look a bit like the Red Bull of granola. It needs energetic, trying to get young people into breakfast. Do you know any brands that are doing this? And we said, well, look, if we came up with a product, would you consider it? He said, well, how can you do that? You're doing popcorn. And for me, another shiny thing with my magpie eyes on, I immediately left the trade show stand and phoned up every granola factory that I could think of or come across, one in the Netherlands, one in Germany, one in Switzerland, trying to persuade them that we had this whopping great opportunity to launch this breakfast cereal brand into Tesco, 400, 600, 1,000 stores, I said, trying to convince them that I was much more with it than I was. We eventually persuaded a factory to send us samples. We went to go and see the buyer with these samples, and he said, do you know what? Let's give this a go. You've got 8 weeks to be on shelf. So what's the brand?
Love it. So this is all spur of the moment. flying by the seat of the pants.
I think if you ask any of these entrepreneurial types their backstory, they'll probably have a very nice, sort of smooth, shiny response for you. But back strategy is probably one of my favorite friends. And I can say that we meant to do everything we meant to do to get to where we got to. But actually, there was a lot of chance. I would say that maybe when you find yourself in a place of luck, actually taking it by the horns when you see it, it is the challenge. And I think a number of people pass through it. For us, we really wanted to see this happen, and we jumped on it. The interesting thing about the brand was that we didn't have a brand at the time, although I had come across a name that I really liked, and Fuel kind of resonated because this buyer wanted this energetic sort of young brand, fuel your mornings. I could sort of see it up in lights. And I came up with this tagline that said, "One life, live it," which kind of very emotive brand. And
I think I've heard that before.
Yeah, well, it wasn't soon after launching and printing lots of packaging that I realized that One Life, Live It actually belongs to Land Rover. And I have a Land Rover, and it says "One Life, Live It" across my windscreen, which of course I'd never really realized was there. We went into an absolute spiral of turmoil to retract the packaging and come up with another brand while we still had product on shelf. And somehow managed to turn it around, and Fuel 10K was then the preceding brand. And 10K was about, again, trying to bring it back to emotive land. 10,000 hours of practice. This is sort of Malcolm Gladwell's story that if you put practice into something, you can become perfect. So it was about the journey, and have a good breakfast in the morning to become great at whatever you want to become great at. And so that ended up sticking, which was a joy to have our own little tagline in the end.
You've talked a bit about the luck that every entrepreneur needs in their journey. Can you tell us about some major crossroads that you might have met as well? I mean, I know you and I have talked a bit about hustle, and there's always a bit of hustle involved. What are the sort of big crossroads that you encountered, and how did you negotiate those?
So I think that's a really interesting question. I think I would probably frame hustle as more using the word perspective and looking at things from other people's points of view. Being what I think is a person that floats over detail, and needing the generalist, the specialist to support me in making decisions. Was also really important to be able to get the views of other people like buyers and other stakeholders who are going to make decisions for you as you went along. So we adopted this strategy that if we could be as collaborative as possible and make people really enjoy the meetings that we were going to have with them, ultimately doing their job for them if they were a supermarket buyer, for example, that would be something that they would perhaps enjoy more so than the big multinationals that were in our breakfast category. So we spent quite a lot of time trying to develop out how could we look like we were more important, a trusted advisor, a more exciting kind of bunch of guys and girls to sit in front of these buyers. And I think that was something that really kind of made us move in the right direction, particularly in the early days. I would also say that one of the things that we weren't afraid of doing was failing. I think failing is probably the wrong word. But I always think that we should just get started and be prepared to fix the issues as you're going. If you overthink things, you'll never get off the ground. If we did a spreadsheet for the journey that we were about to take and knowing what we know now, we would probably never have got going in the first place. It's a bit like starting a family, I think. But being prepared to be in a constant state of self-improvement as a business was something that we took really seriously. And it became one of the foundations of what we did. So perspective and a constant state of self-improvement on the journey was I think what got us through some of the toughest times.
And it sounds like getting stuff done rather than navel gazing and talking about it.
Which is, I think, the world over the biggest issue. Anything never gets done. You just got to get going. And I think that is where you take the step out of the comfort of the rails and you're moving over the line of fear, which most people have. It's probably the biggest reason why people don't take a step into entrepreneurship, because they're worried about where the mortgage money is coming from, where the food on the table money is coming from. And it's when you don't actually fear that, which is probably quite crusading. I think that makes for a slightly different mindset.
So we talked a bit about some of the challenges you've faced and where this whole Fuel 10K concept came from. In terms of the growth of the brand, you've admitted earlier not one to toe the party line, non-conventional in many respects. In terms of growth and funding, can you talk us through how you went about that? Because I know that it's not a conventional route that you took in terms of funding the business.
Yeah, I think, you often look at your peers alongside you, the other entrepreneurs, the other brands that are launching out there and how they're getting through their days. We never took funding into our business. We did later, I think year 6, we took some EIS, which was family and friends investment, but very little investment to get going. And I always had this notion that I wanted to never feel like I owed anyone anything. I wanted to earn the money before we spent it. I think a lot of people would argue that if you had the money in the first place, you might not have taken 12 years to get there. But it was, I think that was a choice, and pretty unconventional in today's world as well. We looked at a lot of the crowdfunding places, a lot of business angels and VCs and PEs and all sorts, and just decided, you know what, let's just do this on our own terms. That way we can make the decisions and move in this sort of slightly precarious way that most people would rely on a business plan. And as you may have heard already, not all business plans end up being the plan that they take. So I think that was quite a big differentiator for us. We were the captain of our own ship, as it were.
And in control, therefore. But then obviously taking the bigger risk, and you become abundantly aware how unemployable you become when you put yourself in that situation, which then drives the incentive that if you don't get out of bed in the morning and put food on the table, no one else is going to do it for you. So there's no easy route out. This has to work. And once you get that into your brain, then it doesn't go away. And I think that's perhaps how I've approached various other things in my life too. Now, we've looked at the growth of the business, where it came from, moving towards the exit, which happened last October. I imagine that wasn't an entirely smooth journey. Can you tell me how that whole exit process occurred, what wrinkles there were in the road, and how you negotiated those?
Yeah, it was quite, again, accustomed to the way I seem to get myself involved in things. It wasn't a very conventional exit. The world just been through COVID. Fortunately for us, we actually came out of COVID quite strong. We were most certainly not touting for exit at all, because we saw some good growth ahead, and we were just getting to reasonably good profitability as well. And plan A was to crack on and make the most of it under our own steam. But we did get an approach, and this was in 2022, by Premier Foods, who ultimately took us out in October last year, and slightly uncomfortable with the offer on the table, but it was very, very flattering, and you don't turn those sort of conversations at least away. We did chew up some of our summer holiday to share some information with them, but as the intensity of the inflationary environment, particularly in food at the time, and the effects of the Ukrainian war and what have you, were taking shape, Premier announced that they were pulling out of their conversation with us. We just felt rather flattened by the fact that we wasted our summer holidays sharing a lot of information. But we picked ourselves up, dusted ourselves down. Plan A was plan A, and that's what we were going to carry on and do. We did think, well, look, we're starting to get quite serious sort of interest. Maybe let's give it another year. Let's sort out some of the issues that we know we still got. and perhaps we'll look at an M&A sort of round exit in 2024. However, in March last year, 23, we got a knock on the door again, and Premier said, "We hear you might be looking at maybe running a process. Would you let us have another early look at it?" At which point, long story short, but we did engage again after a bit of eyeballing of each other, saying, "Well, you're not going to do this again, are you?" And we opened our books, shared the information. We were very, very keen on making sure that, dare I say it, the legacy of the brand was going to continue. So we didn't want this to be some sort of asset strip or some buy and then flatten approach. And in Premier Foods, we saw the whites of their eyes, and they wanted to put rocket boosters behind it. At that point, we kind of felt, this is going to end up in good hands. We can see that we're passing over a good golden goose here, and they're gonna continue growing it, which I think
and are continuing to do so. Can I just take you back? That first initial approach from Premier must have been quite disruptive to the business at the time. Must have been all hands on deck trying to negotiate your way around something that then fell flat. What lessons did you learn from that to avoid a potential repeat of the same scenario, which must have, as you say, wasted your summer holidays at least?
I think.
Did you bring on any personnel to help?
Yeah, I think if you are going to go through an exit, you need to surround yourself with the best you possibly can. We had positioned ourselves for an eventual exit already, myself and my business partner, Alex, and we had an MD in place. We had a product director and a strong team behind it. So we were in a position to be able to let the business continue running and engage in conversation with people like this. My role for a while was to help manage and steer the ship from a people point of view, new product development, new shiny things, export opportunities. That was my skill set. But we had a core team that was running the day to day. And I think without that, that would have really hurt us to disengage with the day to day and focus on the exit, and then for that not to happen. So that would be a big lesson. And straight after that, we hired a CFO as well to really help pull our numbers together and straighten out our DD and what have you.
So just having the right people, the right team behind you allowed you then to, next time round when you had the approach.
But I think it's back to the age. I see myself as a generalist, and I needed specialists, and we didn't have necessarily the full cohort first time round, but we certainly did second time round.
So Barney, you've exited the business October last year, October 2023. I don't see you becoming a professional golfer or retiring into ignominy. I see you as being driven to carry on. What's next? What shiny things have you got in your pocket next?
That's a good question, Jake. Just on the golf theme, I definitely get my money's worth on a golf course. I'd zigzag my way up, and I don't think I'd be very good at taking that into later life. So for me, and a little bit like my career in food so far, I've always had this sort of notion that in your 20s you try and figure out what you're good at, what you're not so good at, what industries do you want to apply yourself to, and I have a lot of jobs in my early 20s to eventually find innocent in the food industry. That then gave me the confidence to go ahead and do my own thing. But I needed the distraction of fresh marketing, which were other people's things, to keep my interest levels flowing. We were running our own brand, but also seeding internationally lots of other people's brands. So selling fuel hasn't been like some great finale. It's just another bit in the journey. Fresh marketing continues. I think since exit in October last year, I've spoken to over 40 founders in the food and drink industry, either through groups and clubs or individually. And I've taken such interest in these young entrepreneurs and all the heffalump traps that they're about to fall into, and trying to kind of give them a little bit of insight on my own journey. And it's not going to be the same for anyone else. So trying to send the lift back down to that cohort of new people coming through, trying to solve the world's issues in the food industry is something that I'm pretty passionate about. To the extent I'm setting up a competition which I'm funding, and I've booked the final to be at the Royal Geographic Society in November, and I'm inviting entrepreneurial minds to try and solve the food and drink issues of tomorrow, whether it's products and projects that they're doing at the moment, or whether it's a brand new idea that they want to air in front of a stellar audience that we're going to have at the RGS. So I'm immersing myself in that at the moment. Lots of shiny things in there, and just to keep my heart ticking, I have just signed up to a trip to the South Pole in January. It's called The Last Degree, and I'm going to be skiing from 89 to 90 in January next year. And maybe I'll take some of the winners of the Future of Food competition down to the pole for a snapshot. So yeah, quite a lot going on.
Training started already?
It's supposed to start in February. No, March. No, next month.
Next month. Mañana.
Mañana.
One last thing. If there was one single piece of advice that you could give to anyone starting out in this sort of world, in that retail world, food retail world that you've been in, what one bit of advice would you offer?
I think I have to do two bits of advice. The first one would be persistence, and the other one is change the strategy if you need to. If you don't have persistence, you'll give up at the first hurdle. You need to dig deep to knock back the knockbacks, as it were, but don't also push water uphill if it ain't flowing that way. You need to be prepared to adjust and tweak and improve along the journey.
Love the fact that you are non-conventional to the last and have to give two final pieces of advice rather than the one. Thanks, Barney.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed listening and watching. To tune in and meet our next exciting guest in the Inspired Sound series, press the follow and subscribe button. Goodbye.